tries to do is isolate the effect that a teacher has and how well they teach certain groups of kids. Now, Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Crawford are going to talk to us about that. One of the hardest things that you're going to have to do as a principal is dispel some of the rumors that people have. Just like when you get me in 603, one of the first ones you have to dispel is that when a kid goes to a charter school, they keep the money for the whole year. They don't. That's not true. And that certain groups of kids are harder to get growth out of than others. That's not true either. What EVAAS does, it's a 10 variable linear regression that controls for everything except the value of the teacher. And we'll go over the actual equation now. As I told you, test scores matter. Your job as a principal is to make a good score go up or a bad score go down. And so this is a state report card. This is Dr. Hamilton's school. Now, proficiency on the left is who you got. Growth on the right is what you do with it. Now, for too long, we thought, well, whoever had the highest scoring kids was doing the best jobs at schools. That's not true. Some schools, just like I used to tease my wife all the time when she was at the IB school in Davidson, there on the campus of Davidson College, that, you know, the most important person in their organization was the custodian, because in the performance model, as long as you get the front door open, the test scores were going to walk right in. Those kids were so smart. The only thing about them, they couldn't get in direct sunlight. Their glasses were so thick it set their paper on fire. That was the only problem with them. But you talking about smart kids, those kids were smart. But you can get growth out of the high kids. So it's easy to get growth out of them. Well, no, you got to score really well. And so as you can see, Dr. Hamilton School, yeah, they're the best and the brightest, 90 on proficiency. But they got growth. They exceeded their growth. You say, well, okay, but you can't get it out of the low ones. Well, let's look at this. This is Dr. Crawford's school. 56, and they exceeded growth as well. So the notion here is, doesn't matter who you get, because every kid's growth score is individual to that kid. You can get a year's growth out of any kid because the expectations are set according to the demographics of that kid. That's what growth is. Value added. Do you grow a kid a year? And so in the EVAAS model, what we're looking for is, does a teacher grow 85% of his or her kids? And as a school, do 85% of your teachers get a year's growth out of their children? Growth is what you do with them. Proficiency is who you get. It doesn't really matter who you get. So I'll go over the model with you, then I'm going to turn it over to, as you can see, our principal experts who are expert at getting growth out of students, which is the name of the game. And so, but I will pull up the EVAAS equation. This is how EVAAS works, or student learning outcomes. They took 20 years of test scores, dumped them into, and did an analysis of variance, and they figured out what are the independent variables that the dependent variable is dependent upon, dependent variable being the test score. So here's how it works. Now, this is not racist or misogynistic. This is just simply data. So what percent of variance in a kid's test score is attributable to these variables? There's only one that we control, by the way, and that's the teacher. So race counts for 30% of a kid's variance in a kid's test score, father's income, mother's education. Teacher, 10% if they're great. School district 5, school 5, grade 5, age 5, gender 5, previous test scores 5. And we do an algorithm on those. And so we look at an individual kid. That's how their expected score, their growth score is calculated. And it's not for a group, it's for every individual kid. And yes, the school has all that data at its fingertips about that child. So let's work through a scenario right quick with a kid at a third grade kid at Billingsville in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. All right, Jamar's a third grade student in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. His independent, that should be independent variables. His independent variables are, he's black, he gets 20 out of 30. If he's white, he'd get 30 out of 30. That's historical test scores. If he's Hispanic, he'd get 15 out of 30 in his algorithm. His mother has less than a high school diploma, that'd be 5 out of 15. If she had beyond a 4-year degree, he'd get 15. No father in home, 0 out of 15. If the father's income is excess of 150, it would be 15 on his algorithm. Why is that? If dad makes enough money, mom stays at home. What does mom do? Lap time, raise the kids. gets them ready for school. Teacher, we always assume is 10. CMS is a high wealth district. A low wealth district would be 2. Billingsville was a takeover school, lowest of the low. High growth school would be 5. Grade 5, he got 5 because he wasn't a repeater. However, his age was not appropriate to his grade. He was developmentally delayed and didn't start school till 6, so he gets 3 out of 5 points. His gender gets 5 because he's a male, because it's a math test. If he was female, it'd be the opposite. So reading test, he gets 4. Females get 4 on math, 5 on reading. It's just historical test score data. Previous scores 2 because he wasn't, according to his M-class data, he was not on grade level coming out of 2nd grade. So his algorithmic equation looks like this. We add all those points together. What that means is he's got to get 55% of the questions right on the 3rd grade EOG math test in order to show a year's growth. He doesn't have to get all of them right. He's just got to get 55%. So if there's 180 questions, he's got to get 99. We multiply it by 0.55. And so Jamar has to get 99 out of 180 to show a year's growth. It is customized to that kid according to his independent variables. That's the way student learning outcomes and EVAAS works. So it is not true that certain kids are easier to get growth. It's the same. It's the same to get growth out of any kid because his score is dependent upon that kid. But there are certain things that you have to do as a principal that you know that you need to do when you're looking at your growth scores about what teachers ought to be teaching what. I had an AP European AP teacher 25 years ago when I was last high school principal, which was exactly 25 years ago. I mean, it wasn't too hard to figure out that he shouldn't be teaching European AP when he was 0 forever. He'd never had a kid pass the AP exam ever. He was 0 for. He don't need to be teaching European. He didn't need to be teaching anything. He needed to be helping the custodian. He might have been the worst teacher I ever seen that was actually trying. He didn't need to be teaching. He didn't need to be teaching math. There were certain things that we could get by with him on, but he definitely didn't need to be teaching AP kids. He could not connect with them in any stretch of the imagination. That's what we're talking about. When you do that master schedule that you're going to learn with me next semester, who teaches what, where, and when is the heart of your school, folks. The master schedule. Whoever controls your master schedule runs your school. If it's a secretary or the counselor, then they run your school. That's the way it works. But we have to know who's going to teach what, where, and when. Now, our 2 resident experts here that are in the role, they're going to talk to you more specifically about how you look at EVAAS scores and what you do with them. This is most important when you're trying to figure out how to schedule your school, how to get the best test scores out of your school, what your most pressing need is. It all comes back to growth. So I will turn it over to Drs. Hamilton and Crawford. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'll be back and talk about Qualtrics and Taskstream later.
Dr. Hamilton, you want me to start or?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so I'll be brief. What Dr. Lamb just shared. Good evening, everyone. What Dr. Lamb just shared with you was basically where EVAAS comes from. What I want to talk with you about is what you do with it at the school level. That is where you are going to live. And so the graphic that he showed was my previous school, what I walked out the door with, and it took me a while to get there, but we were able to do it. I'm in a very different situation now, and trying to achieve the same thing. So what I want to just show you briefly is exactly what it is you're looking at. And for those of you in South Carolina, understand that I know one of your biggest data points is measures of academic progress. And so it works the same with MAP down in South Carolina. For those of you in elementary school, when you're looking at DIBELS data, and this is what I want to get into, DIBELS data and MAP data are norm referenced across the country. And that's one of the things that you have to understand, that when you're looking at those kids' scores, those scores are not just relative to that kid in that school. MAP data in South Carolina, DIBELS data for all you elementary folks. When you look at those scores, that's where that kid falls compared to similar kids across the country. Same thing when those of you in North Carolina are looking at your student prediction scores in EVAAS, which come out ridiculously late, but they're here. And so I wanted to give you a live look. I believe this was my sixth grade predictive data or expected scores last year. And so for those of you in North Carolina, when you look into EVAAS, the column that's up here, it'll say NCE, which stands for normal curve equivalent. So just like for those of you in South Carolina, the map data is norm reference to students across the country that use with schools and school districts that use map. For those of you elementary folks that are looking at DIBELS data is the same way. It's norm referenced for kids across the country with schools and school districts that are using DIBELS, which is a lot of them, which is why they can do that. North Carolina, when you're looking at the kids' predicted score, these scores are norm referenced across the state of North Carolina. So from the coast where Dr. Hamilton is to Hayesville up in the mountains, you spit and you're in Tennessee. From Mecklenburg County to Eden, those scores are norm referenced to kids across the state of North Carolina. So when you are looking at this number, and this is critical, what you're looking at is, so when you set it up in EVAAS, level 3 is not college, it's not CCR, college and career ready, but it's passing the EOG. And mind you, level 3 is only proficient through 5th grade. Anything lower than level 3, level 4 from 6th to 12th grade is not proficient, for those of you in North Carolina, if you didn't know that. So this number here is the student's expected score, and I want to be clear, relative to kids across the state, which means this student only has to score better than 1% of kids across the state of North Carolina. Right. So you think, oh my God, and so the data point that I don't have on here is their percentage probability of scoring level 3. I don't really pay too much attention to that. This is what I want my teachers to look at. So you see, and I think these kids are all 7th graders now. So this year that my range in my building went from a 1% all the way up to a 91%, which means this kid needs to score better than 91% of kids across the state. So yes, your conversations with teachers and their instructional practices are going to be different when you're looking at these kids on this end of the spectrum versus the kids here on this end of the spectrum. And that's really just relative to their needs. Yes, it's nice to have a kid that's got is expected to score at 91% better than the state. But if you don't have a teacher that knows how to apply that level of rigor to these high performing kids, then you're going to have a kid that grossly underperforms. And it's critical to understand that. So again, this column here, for those of you in North Carolina, is what you're focusing in on. And again, and it's not, so when you look at the EOG scores, and let's say this kid, let's get this kid scored a level 4 and, he got we'll say a 68%. And that means, so that's just his proficiency score. And that's why there is a gap, for those of you in North Carolina, between your proficiency score, which you will know when testing is done, and why there's delay until the summer when the school gets an overall EVAAS growth, your growth score, because they've got to take all those states, compile them, and then see where those scores fall along that bell curve. So that's the first thing I wanted you to look at, and to know exactly what you're looking at when you're looking at these numbers, and why it's so critical that you've got the right teachers in the right place. In that data that Dr. Lamb pulled up at my previous building, we looked at that data, with EOGs for my 3-5 kids, but we took a deep dive into DIBELS with everybody, but really my K1 and 2. I had a first grade teacher who, when you looked at her EVAAS data, and Dr. Hamilton is going to show you what I'm talking about, her lower performing kids tended to do extremely well, but her high performing kids didn't. They tended to not meet growth. And so we were just having some conversation about, what that was. And she quite honestly looked at me and she said, Dr. Crawford, I don't know what to do with them. I've got so many kids that are coming with so many needs. I tend to focus my energies there, and it makes sense. She's a phenomenal teacher, caring teacher. I mean, she's if you came to me and said, would you trust your baby in that teacher's classroom? Absolutely, I would have. And mine would have been okay. But so what we then did was I said, okay, well, let's get you some specific help in what to do with higher performing kids. So you can also use this as a PD goal as well. So it's critical to understand what you're looking at with this number and what it means and why it's so important to make sure you have the right people teaching the right scores. So then how I look at that and how I have teachers look at that, because you don't want teachers to be divorced from this process. And so for the last several years, I have made my teachers go through, stop it, go with that, go through a protocol where once EVAAS scores come out, I then make them go through this protocol every year for every teacher that generates EVAAS data. For my BTs, I actually sit and do this with them. So I actually have my BTs after school Monday, and I walk through this with them because this is not going to make any sense to them whatsoever. But basically what this does is it has teachers break down exactly where to go when they log into EVAAS, and then where to pull those subgroup reports. So again, with that teacher I referenced at my former school, the subgroup she was looking at was that initial one where it breaks it down to low, middle, and high kids. And consistently, like 3 years running, her low performing kids were well above that meets growth, but her high performing kids were not. And so we took the time based on data and we addressed that for her. So it's really self-explanatory, but for teachers that are experienced, again, for your BTs, newer teachers, I would not leave them to their own devices. So I led that session with my BTs, all 13 of them, just this past week to make sure I went through this with them so I could help them interpret their results, understanding what it means, why I asked them to do certain things, everything from the video module. And then I've just got some questions that I asked them to think through, everything from who's making growth and how do you know that? When you look at last year's data, because the real bad thing about this is your EVAAS data is autopsy data. So unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about the kids that the teacher just had. You're really using this to inform what they may need to do for the kids they've got right in front of them. For us, third quarter, second semester starts Monday the 29th. And when you factor out the week of testing and the week of spring break, and you factor out the last 2 weeks of the year for testing and retesting, there's really only about 75 days of school left. And so how do we make this last 2.5 months the most productive that we can be? So I really forced them to go through this. And last year, when I introduced this to my new staff, they were all very uncomfortable. But I forced them to go through it because they just been given their number, and they thought they were okay. And I'm like, well, no, we're going to figure out why that number is what it is and how we can do to improve it. So I found this very good this year, much less pushback, much better and more deeper conversations about what this means, especially for my ELA teachers, because we actually made growth with ELA. So how can we take that makes growth to exceed growth for my ELA folks? My math EVAAS last year at my new school was -637. And so those conversations were a lot different. with growth and what we need to do to push forward to, hell, let's just get to make growth. We'll worry about exceeds later. Let's just make that year's worth of growth. And so we've been having those conversations there. I also make sure, because of when the data comes in, that when teachers complete this, I also have them add this as part of their mid-year artifacts for the mid-year PDP conference. So again, it makes it that much more tangible as well. The only thing I did differently this year, and this is an EVAAS, but I also added this, since we use Educators Handbook to track our data. Same thing. It's not as in depth, but when we pull up Educators Handbook, when a teacher pulls it up, what shows up is what they have done for the year. So we go through the exact same thing. And I was actually sharing some of that data with Dr. Lamb earlier about just how just kind of where I am even with that. Again, I inherited a situation where, shall we say, the guards had to find the keys to the asylum. We found them, and we're doing much better. And just one of those data points. This time last year, we were at close to, I think it was 400. I'm sorry. It's close to over 600 referrals at the midway point of last year. And I want to admit that number's probably soft. I mean, we literally got to a point my first year last year, we couldn't keep up with the tomfoolery. So it was like 606 at the midway point last year. This year, we're down to 488. Not great, not perfect, but I will take a 188 referral drop in 1 year. So anyway, but back to EVAAS, that's what I do with mine to make it tangible with teachers, to make sure that they have the opportunity to not only understand their data, but own it, and then use that previous data to inform current and future instruction. Any questions that I can answer for anybody right now? Again, I did the same thing at my previous building. That's how I was able to walk out the door, exceeding growth, and my successor has done a phenomenal job and rocking and rolling. And that is the plan that I've outlined for my current building as I look to move the needle on this place as well. Any questions I can answer for anybody?
Dr. Crawford,
Yes,
let me remind the students again. Thank you for a lot of what you said. Remember, you're looking at this from the lens of what an administrator should do, a practicing administrator. This is from the mouths of people that have lived this. Now, I know many of you are thinking, well, I've never heard of this before, or I've heard of EVAAS, but nobody has ever explained this to me. So this is a lesson. This is what you should be doing as an effective administrator. You should understand it, and your staff should learn from you. You know, don't just say EVAAS. They need to understand EVAAS. So what Dr. Lamb and Dr. Crawford and Dr. Hamilton are sharing with you now, these are the things that you should begin thinking about when I become an administrator. This is what I need to do with my staff. Dr. Hamilton?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Glad to see you this evening. So just to sort of piggyback on all that, so to sort of make EVAAS maybe a little more understandable, just think of colors: blue, green, red. Blue means you exceeded, and EVAAS uses these colors. Green means you met, and red means you did not meet the expected growth. So you didn't make a year's worth of growth. So every year I put a number line just like this on the board when we start at the staff meeting, we look at the overall. Oh, great, we exceeded growth. We're doing great work, right? Well, maybe the teacher down the hall there, maybe she has red. Maybe she's riding high in the staff meeting. Oh, we did great. So then we have our grade level meetings, and we'll go over like what each grade level had as the whole grade level. And then I will just sort of plot a little dot on the chart for each member of the grade level. I don't put their name on there. I just plot. And I've handed them their own folder with their own EVAAS, and they can look it up themselves and see it, but just to make sure. And then that way they can really see, like, were they a leader in that grade level? Did they How did they do? How did they contribute to that? Or did they really drag their grade level down? And that's just a confidential thing. And then, like Dr. Crawford, we have that conversation confidentially one-on-one during the mid-year PDP. And then we talk about ways to try to enhance and make growth in those areas. So anything between, so the 0 line equates to 1 year's growth. So that's our job, right? Our job is we get a kid, we need to give them at least 1 year of growth. They've given us a year of their life. And so we need to make sure they've grown at least 1 year. So that 0 line would represent that. So between the +2 and the -2 to take in for standard errors, that is meets growth. That represents meet. Anything that is 2.0 or higher exceeds, or a -2.0 or lower does not meet growth expectations. So, not scrolling, here we go. So you're looking at the growth index. Now, in some EVAAS reports, you're going to see growth measure, and that's fine. It's a part of the calculation, but it's the growth index that you're going to look at. And the growth index is the growth measure divided by the standard error. Again, we're glad they have the colors, right? So this helps determine the effect that the adult had on the children. So children are compared to other children from across the state with similar testing histories to determine if they made the expected growth, if they made more growth than was expected, or if they did not grow as much as they should have grown. And of course, this comes to you as the teacher reports. So you can see it's a reflection for the teacher. So the growth indicators, here they are again. And you'll also notice that in EVAAS, they have varied the shades of green so that darker green is between 1 and 2 standard errors above. The medium colored green is 1 standard error below to above. And then that last range between 1 and 2 standard errors below is that lighter green. So that's also an indication of, was your MET growth a strong MET growth, or are you really walking on eggshells? And you really need to watch yourself because you're very close to that red, which of course nobody wants to be in the red. So you have that, and then you can also have your principal show you how to run some other reports in EVAAS. So the school growth of student groups, you can look at that by subject area, or you can look at that by student group. And that's really helps you drill down to see where your strong areas were and maybe some areas that need some looking into, and really try to figure out what you can do to help certain subgroups. This really helps sort of peel back that wallpaper and see where you might have some problems. So I've ran this by student group. And so the academically gifted students in 3rd grade, so this was reading, okay, because 3rd graders don't have math EVAAS because they don't have a testing history. They only have the BOG in reading. This is in North Carolina. So in 3rd grade, you see that growth measure and that standard error, and then that's calculated to come up with that growth index. So the 3rd graders met with a 0.43. The 4th graders exceeded with 2.26, and the 5th graders exceeded with 2.06. And the beauty of this is that you can keep this throughout the years, and you can go back and look for trends. And you can see if that's always been the trend, then what do we need to think about? Do we feel confident that by 4th grade they're going to be exceeding? But what about in 3rd grade? What are we doing? Are we so busy trying to make sure everybody's passing read to achieve? Are we so busy trying to move from that learning how to read in K1 and 2 to really learning how to comprehend and apply more critical thinking in grade 3? Are we not strong enough with that? Are we not doing enough in 2nd grade with our brighter children to help prepare them for that 3rd grade? So what's happening with that? Economically disadvantaged. They met growth as well in reading, but that's a -1.28. Now that's teetering a little too close for comfort right there, right? That's 3rd grade. 4th grade 1.33, and fifth grade 1.16. The number of students you have in those groups also can really impact. The greater the number you have in any data set, the more valid and reliable that data set will be. And then this is the Hispanic, but you can, the point is that you can break it down into those different groups, different tested areas, and that can really help you drill down and see the areas in which you need to work. So this is elementary, of course. So this is from the EVAAS homepage. And this just tells you that the school accountability growth is calculated on math, reading, and science in elementary school. So what does that mean? That means your K1 and 2, even though those teachers do receive EVAAS scores, they do not contribute to your overall school score. So that puts a lot of pressure on those third, fourth, and fifth grade teachers because they get their individual scores as well. But the whole school score is based on theirs. And that's why those teachers have opportunities for bonuses and things like that. So that I think came out this week. So in elementary school during a typical year, now remember, third grade does not have math EVAAS because they don't have a testing history for the end of grade test. So they only have reading. So in third grade, reading counts for 1/6 of your school's accountability growth. In fourth grade, reading and math counts. So that's 1/3 of your growth for your school. And in fifth grade, reading, math, and science. So you have 6 test points. You have third grade reading, fourth grade reading and math, fifth grade reading, math, and science. So half of those come from fifth grade. So half of your school's accountability growth comes from your fifth graders. So in fourth and fifth grade, there are no class size limits in the state of North Carolina. So when you have your teacher allotment, and we have those very stringent class size limits in K1, 2, and 3. So when you have your teacher allotments and you have X number of teachers for X number of students in fourth and fifth grade, and you have to make a decision on fourth and fifth grade, who is going to have the class sizes of 28, 29, or 30, and which grade level can have a class size of 22 or 23, my fifth grade teachers are going to have the smaller class sizes if I have to make that decision. Because half of my school accountability growth is on them. And so they will be the ones that will get the smaller class sizes. Anytime I can do that. If you're having to make a combo class and you're trying to decide if that combination is going to be between fourth grade and fifth grade or third grade and fourth grade, I would make it the third grade and fourth grade one. Because at least the science piece is not in there. So just you keeping that in mind and thinking about that. If you have teachers that historically just knock it out of the ballpark with EVAAS, you might want them in fifth grade. So also in EVAAS, you'll see this decision dashboard. Your principal can show you. This is just an example right here. This was into grade 4. It's in quintile, so I didn't have enough students in quintile 1 and 2 to report out. But this tells me that my quintile 3 students, so they were, sort of the middle, right, between 1 and 5, they met growth. The quintile 4s exceeded, and then my 5s met. So what happened with those 4s that they were able to exceed? And some of them could be an AIG, but the likelihood is they're maybe the ones that are staying back and not going. So my fourth grade teachers, did they do a lot to really enhance and support those students in smaller group with that critical thinking that really helped them? So this is what you have to really look at that pattern, look at the grade level pattern, look at the teacher pattern to see, and then have those conversations with your teachers and from your own observations as well. So here's just an example about teacher A from 2017, 18, and 19, and teacher B. This just lists what they did, individual teachers. This is just 2 teachers, of course. Q1 students, Q2, Q3, Q4, and Q5. So teacher B might not be someone that we want to be teaching the academically gifted children. Teacher A really and truly has not done very well with her middle children. So what is teacher A doing? Is she spending all her time like trying to enhance and enrich the brighter children? And is she pulling those lower ones in Q1 and Q2? And she is just trying so hard to just get them to pass the test, which too is important, right? I mean, every child's important, all their learning is important. It's a lot. But are the middle of the road children who are sitting there just sort of being quiet and well behaved, are they getting overlooked? So what's happening with them? And that's a powerful conversation, first of all, for your own decision making. Think about that. But that is a very powerful conversation to have with that teacher who may not even have an awareness that that is the impact. And then, and this got messed up a little during COVID, and hopefully it will is back now. But this is a teacher's trend data from 2017, 2018, 2019. And then this is called a multi-year trend. So the multi-year trend is not a simple average. They take all 3 years of the data and they treat it as one data set, and then they apply the EVAAS rules to that to come up with the multi-year trend. So even though this teacher was green, 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 met, almost didn't meet, right? Met, still pretty close to not meeting, met, did a little bit better that year, still didn't get to the 1 year line though, right there. But when you took all that, again, not a simple average, and they treated it as one data set, and again, the more data you have, the more valid and reliable it is, that showed this teacher had the multi-year trend of not meeting growth. That's hard for a teacher to grasp and understand, but I was green, how can I be red? That's hard to grasp and understand. And it's important too that when you are observing or when you're walking through, if you notice nuances of things about the teacher that you think could be contributing to this, it's just important to have that conversation, not in a mean or mad way, but just in a respectful way, because your job is to help them so that they can help every child in that school. And it's important to be able to have those conversations with them. And that was just that, the same thing that it showed above. It just came out in that chart like that there. And the other thing I did want to just share with you quickly, your principal should have this in North Carolina. It's called an internal results review report. And it is probably stamped confidential and everything, but this is a great report if your principal will share this with you that can really help you in your PLC through this process. So the first thing I want us to see is that in elementary school, your achievement, so your end-of-grade scores, count for 80% of your school performance grade, and EVAAS growth counts for 20. And for years, there has been this big debate of people wanting that to be, those two numbers to be more closely related. But for now, this is what it still is. It is the 80-20. So that is what that is. And so that's where we are with that. I think my computer is going to hold on for just a second. And so there's that. And then the high school, you have your English 2 and high school math EOC scores, ELL progress, biology, ACT work keys, and math course rigor. That's 80%. And then again, for high school, 20% growth. So on this report, this internal review report, you'll have a page sort of like this. It's achievement, it's the growth calculation that gives you your performance number, and then they assign a grade to that. So if your achievement was 80%, then they convert your growth on a 100-point scale, and that counts 20%. And so that's where that comes from. And it also has all the subgroups broken down for you. So you can see this school does pretty good with the exception of their ELS and students with disabilities. They have D's there. So you can see that, and this is going to be that grade that's going to be printed in the newspaper and all those things. Now that achievement counts for levels 3 through 5 in elementary. Dr. Crawford said 3s don't count, middle and above. And the school performance grade in North Carolina is still on that 15-point scale. When they started with those, they said they were going to start on the 15-point scale and then move to a 10-point scale, but they have not yet moved to that 10-point scale. So that is, of course, this would be the overall letter grade for that school. It also, on that first page, it gives you this stat table, and it's good. It gives you the number of scores, and then the overall index for everybody for everything. So like if elementary, that would be all the reading, all the math, and all the science. And that would be an overall school growth index of 4.7. And this one exceeds. It tells you about your subgroups of students, whether or not they exceeded or met or how they did. And then it breaks it down for you for just reading and for math. And then you can see right there are the AIG results as well. So that is on that page, and that is a really good one too. That is a part of that internal results review report that could be very good for you to look at. It also gives you, besides the proficiency grade levels 3, 4, and 5, it gives you that college and career readiness table. That'll let you know what percentage of students got 4s and 5s, college and career ready. And that can help you look at that data, like who are just those 3s. It breaks it down by every grade level, every subject that you test. It's just a really good report to be able to look at. So that's what I had to share this evening. If you have any questions?
Dr. Hamilton, I saw one of my students put it in their Heather did that this is the first time she's heard of it. But Heather, you're in North Carolina, right?
Yes, sir, but this is also my first year in North Carolina.
Okay. This is every public school, every school in North Carolina, they have to do exactly what Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Crawford has just shared with you and Dr. Lamb. So my thing is, Dr. Lamb, wouldn't you recommend if I would have a conversation with my principal and say, do you have time to explain and show me EVAAS for our school as an intern at your school? I would hope that they would share that with you.
And Dr. Stedman, may I add that in May, that teachers are supposed to verify their EVAAS rosters.
Yes.
And verify the percent of time that they work with each child and are responsible for that child. And it never ceases to amaze. I mean, last year I had some new folks from North Carolina, and we started doing roster verification, and they said they had never done that before. They didn't know anything about it. So,
And Dr. Lamb, if they're from South Carolina, can they ask for EVAAS, or would they need to ask for something else?
Yes. They have a growth indicator as well. That's exactly right.
Okay, so you need to ask whatever the growth indicator is, ask your principals as well. Can they sit down and share that with you?
All right. So to give you a glimpse of 603 next semester very quickly, this is the North Carolina General Statute. South Carolina is arranged in title, North Carolina in General Statutes. I just pulled this up because it was handy. 115C, 288, 115C are the North Carolina Education Statutes. You are required as a principal legally to improve instruction. The principal shall give suggestions to teachers for improvement of instruction. That's why all this comes under. That's why I told you kind of the first night that we met, if you don't think test scores are important, this is not the job for you. It's all that's important. Student achievement is what we do. We don't do schools for daycare. We don't do them so adults can have jobs. They're for student learning only. And if you don't understand that, you will not do well. And if you can't convince your teachers that you can get growth out of any kid, you will not do well. It's all about growth. Kids got to be learning in your building or you won't last. That's the only reason they hire you. You don't teach a soul. So here's the first pop quiz of the evening. This goes back to what Dr. Hamilton said. She showed you in your master schedule, you've got to make some decisions about where you're going to put personnel in terms of class sizes. That's a big part of EVAAS as well, is looking at where are my tested areas? Where do I need to get my support and my help? So I'm going to share my screen. And you got to pick one of these two answers. So this is from the most famous research project ever in the history of education. It's called the STAR Report out of Tennessee. And they did an extensive study of test scores, the whole state. So what configuration, back to what Dr. Hamilton just said to you, what configuration gets the highest student performance? Is it one teacher assistant, and 30 kids? Is it one teacher assistant, 15 kids? One teacher, 30 kids, or one teacher and 15 kids? And so you have to pick. The answer is either A, B, C, D, or D, C, B, A. Which is it? Anybody want to venture a guess? Is it A, B, C, D, or D, B, C, A? I mean, D, C, B, A. It's real simple. It's D, C, B, A. Now, that insults teacher assistants. You know, I always heard big dog hollers the loudest. Teachers do better without assistants because they don't end up supposedly teaching the kids like they do about half the time. But what really tells us is what really matters in instruction is class size. That's what we found out from the STAR report. What did Dr. Hamilton just tell you? If she's got to decide on 30 in one grade and 22 in the other, the one that has the most testing, she's going to go 22 on them because she knows the most important thing in this alignment in terms of class sizes and assistants is class size. No, not this. We'll get them an extra assistant. No. That won't move the needle. It'll actually hurt your test scores. If you want to improve your test scores, you reduce class size. You know, one teacher with 30 kids outperforms a teacher and assistant with just 15. You've got to understand what moves the needle. And you've got to have these critical conversations with teachers. That's your job. You heard Dr. Crawford say with his BT, for those of you who aren't familiar with the lingo, BT's beginning teachers, he's got 13 of them. You know, that's a bunch. But he didn't leave it to somebody else. He didn't leave it to chance. He met with them himself and started teaching them, you know, how we're going to monitor instruction. We don't just go to the room and look. We monitor it through our data as well. He's already told them. Yeah, it's kind of like how you tell the gender of a puppy. You have to lift their tail and look. You know, we got to do more than just look. We have to follow our data as well. And that's what he's teaching his teachers. They've got to be able, they can track their own data. And they can see who they do well with and who they don't do well with. And as was mentioned earlier, teachers said, I just don't know what to do with those kids. Well, you know, we got to do something. What's the theory of insanity? Do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. And you got to know what caused your scores to either go up or go down. I was working with one of my doctorals yesterday. I had a meeting with her. She's trying to gather data at Cleveland Academy in Spartanburg District 7. Some of you might be close to that. Their test scores went up. Their proficiency went up last year, but they don't know why. How are we going to make it happen again if we don't know how it happened last time? They weren't tracking their data. They don't know why it went up. We're going to have to try to figure out why their proficiency scores went up for the first time ever. They made proficiency 60, you know, the cutoff is 62. They made 65% proficient for the first time ever at that school. They don't know why. It might just be random. You know, if you've ever been an elementary principal, you know there's a great variation in the groups that you get when, you know, first graders this year versus first graders last year. And then every once in a while you get that high group. But unfortunately, every once in a while you get that group of booger eaters too. And boy, they just kill you on your test scores. And so you've got to have a plan in place how you're going to deal with that. you got to work your numbers, folks. You know, you got to make a good number go up or a bad number go down. There is a way to do that. And when you're figuring out what your most pressing need is in your school, you got to be following that growth data, not just, you know, we're at 90% on proficiency. Well, that just means you got smart kids. But what you do with them, that's what you'll be judged on as a principal, what you do with them. Do you make growth or not? So don't be fooled by proficiency scores. That will not get you by. It's got to be about growth. It's got to be about good instruction, high quality instruction, high yield strategies. It has to be about those things. It has to be about teachers knowing where they are, having those critical conversations, as Dr. Crawford said. You got to have those critical conversations with teachers. You're doing well here or you're not doing well here. As Dr. Hamilton said, you know, are you holding up your end in the 4th grade, or are you know, is it like trying to pull a turning plow? You know, it's you know, we're having to drag you. You know, you have to have those critical conversations. You have to do their growth plans every year. You have to improve instruction. That is your job. All right. I told everything I know and some things I didn't. So I think we're done with EVAAS. We'll talk more about EVAAS next semester when we talk about master scheduling. All right. Am I on for what, doing Taskstream and Qualtrics now? I think you're muted, Dr. Stedman.
Yeah, whatever you want to cover tonight, and then you'll finish up next week.
All
with
right.
what you don't cover.
Well, I'm gonna cover Taskstream and I'll save Qualtrics because I followed up on Taskstream today.
Okay.
All right. David Hoover, you're the only one who has a previous Taskstream account. If you don't remember your username and password, you need to email Julie May. She's JMay, the number 6 at Gardner Web, JMAY 6. And she'll help you. Everybody else, you have new accounts. And so you'll be getting an email from Watermark, WATERMARK. They are the parent company for Taskstream. You have 48 hours from the time they send it to go in and register your account. Do not change your username and password that Gardner Web set up for you. If you do that and something happens, then we can't help you. And you'll have to wait for customer support from Taskstream, which you may be as old as me when they get around to you. So don't change your password yet. You can change it later on. Let's get everybody's account established to start with. All right. So you'll get that email. You'll establish your account. All right. So all I'm going to show you tonight is what Taskstream looks like, the DRF. Next week, I will teach you how to build your competency folio, because that takes a few minutes. There's a video in your shell. So let me share my screen. And so when you go to Taskstream, let me get that out of the way.
Dr. Lamb, that is important that you remember. You need to be checking your Gardner Web emails several times a day. Now, this is another reason why. If you miss it, like Dr. Lamb said, then you know there's problems behind you missing your email.
Yeah. If it expires, you know, then we'll have to go back through the process again, and they may charge you another $150. So, you know, check your spam, check, you know, make sure it didn't go to junk. All right, so go to Taskstream the first time. They'll have a link for you to go, but if you don't, just go to taskstream.com, and it will redirect you to the Watermark site. When you get here, you just hit the sign in button. You use your Gardner Web. The same username and password is how we set it up. That gets you into email, Web Connect, Blackboard. Same one. When you get to this screen, you simply choose Taskstream, one of their products. You put your username and your password in, and you sign in. You will only have one DRF. I have multiples, but you will only have one. I'm going to switch over to your view. And so you'll have one DRF, and it will say either MSA 12-month spring 2024 or MSA 20-month spring 2024. You'll only have one of these. And when you click on that, this is the student view. You will see what you're responsible for in your state portfolio during the duration of your program. Now, let me say this. You will only get one DRF. You'll only make one competency folio. This will stay with you the entire time you're at Gardner Web. You won't get a new one every year. You won't make another one. You don't have to do all of it in one semester. This lasts the duration of your program. This is the state assessment portfolio. That's why it costs money. This is not a Gardner Webb thing. It is not linked to anywhere. You have to go to their website. This is the state assessment portfolio. This is not a Gardner Webb thing. All right. So for those of you in the 12-month program, you can see what you're responsible for this semester. In 601, you have to do the app sale, the app tell. Once they're approved by your coach and your instructor and your Blackboard scale, you'll bring them over here. We don't do comments over here. We upload them for evaluation. I'll show you that next week. You have to do a competency analysis. You do that at the end of the semester. We'll talk more about that. And you do the School of Ed dispositions. You can do those at any time, but I will caution you. I'll click on that. I'll caution you on the School of Ed disposition. If you rate yourself above meets expectations, you have to see this box right here. Using the North Carolina principal and South Carolina principal executive standards, you have to tell us how you exceeded the standard before you even started the program. That's not a Dale rule. That's a state rule. Now, if you click meets or less, then you don't have to put anything in that box. But if you think based on the standard for a principal that you're already there, by all means, click on that and we'll read it. So you have to rate yourself in all these areas that right now at the beginning of the program, as you start this program, you have to rate yourself where you are so that you can track your own growth as you move through the program. All right, so those are the 4 things that all of you will be responsible for. Those of you in 603, you'll do the OMA, the skip, and dispositions. And then in your last semester, the CAP, the SIOP, your last disposition and competency analysis, we've got a little survey, and then you'll have to upload your logs. Don't put your semester logs here. This is at the end of your program. This is an IQ test now. And I'm going to remind you of that. When I go in and it says evaluate somebody's log and it's somebody in the first semester, they put their semester log here rather than the competency folder. I'm going to remind you that you didn't pass the IQ test. So that's at the end of your program. The final competency folio at the end of your program. That's why it's not under a semester here when you're taking a course. You don't touch those last 2 until you are in the last 2 weeks of your program, whether that's this fall or summer after next. You do not touch these last 2 until then. Leave them alone. As your mama used to say, don't pick at it. Leave it alone. Don't make me have to send those back. That's an ordeal that you put me through. So we will teach you how to make the separate folio next week because it is a little involved. It becomes yours and you can download it and publish it, share it with people. You can get renewal credits out of it. It's great to share with prospective employers about getting a job. We'll work on that next week. But these are the ones that you have for the 12-month program. It's yours is set up that way. Now, the 20-month program, folks, let me go back one on that. You can do it. Yours looks like this. Now you say, well, the app tells in 602. Now we're going to do both this semester, and then next semester, when you have your research in the summer, which is overwhelming, you won't have one due. Plan ahead. And so you're going to do 2 this semester because it is the longest semester. It's 17 weeks long. The summer session, while on paper it says that it lasts 10 weeks, it actually only lasts 8 in reality. And you got your research block. And doing both of those at the same time is in 8 weeks is hard. So we're going to go ahead and get the app tail knocked out. You won't have one this summer, and then you'll be back on track in the fall with me in the OMA. You can see you're just paced a little bit differently, but you have the same things that you will do. So this is what Taskstream looks like. This is what it looks like from your view. Next week, I will teach you how to build your competency folio. It takes 2 minutes. And you will keep it, as I said, the entire length of your program. That's where we put artifacts. We'll explain artifacts to you. Evidences go here. App sale is an evidence. The app tail is an evidence. Artifacts are things that are byproducts of your work. We'll go over what artifacts are that you'll generate from your internship. We'll do that next week. We'll build that, and we'll talk about Qualtrics. We'll be right on time for when you need to send out a survey to your faculty a little bit later this semester. So I see our time is up for the evening. I'll need at least 30 minutes next week. I don't want to dive into that tonight, but that's what it looks like. What was important tonight, and again, I made the effort to walk down the steps for some reason other than to go to the bathroom, to go to Julie's office and find out this stuff. So it's out there, folks. It's being emailed to you now. Fulfill your obligation. Knock that out. To verify Taskstream email address and password, your username and password. So like me, my username is DLam. It's not DLam at Gardner Webb. Your username is not with the at Gardner Webb. It's just your username. I'm DLam. Dr. Stedman's D Stedman. Dr. Revis is K Rev. Dr. Hamilton is R Hamilton 5. Because there's before R Hamilton's before her. But it's not the at Gardner Webb. That is not part of your username. Just like when you get in anything. So it's your username, DLam, and it's whatever password. It's the same password that you use to get into Web Connect email, Blackboard. Username, password. You should not see anything that says at Gardner Webb. Good question. All right. Now, the email will come from Watermark. Don't think it's spam. Make sure you check those. If you've got I would encourage you, I know I'm a million years old. Only person I know is older than me is Dr. Stedman. He's old. He went to school with my daddy. I know you all want to work on your phones, but you need to invest in a good laptop. Because a lot of these things that we're going to ask you to do are not phone-based applications. Don't use the school one because they'll come get it or it'll crash or whatever. Spend $300 on a good laptop so you can do some of these things, especially when you start trying to work in Taskstream, uploading artifacts, doing things. It can't be done from your phone. And most of the time, the emails will not come through on your phone from Watermark or Taskstream. They'll only come through to a laptop account when you've got the full account up and running in Outlook. And so that's another reason why you should invest in a good laptop. Everything can't be done. I know the young people don't believe it, but everything can't be done on your phone. Blackboard and Taskstream. Now, the new iteration of Blackboard that is coming in the fall will be phone friendly for the first time. It's called Blackboard Ultra. You can sit and just wear your thumb out on it. But the one we have now is not compatible with a cell phone. Taskstream will never be compatible with a cell phone. So, or a tablet. So my point in that is don't send me an email that says, I can't get this to work on my tablet. Well, duh. It doesn't work on tablets, nor does it work on phones. You have to have a grown-up adult computer to do this stuff. And so, I can't help you if you don't have the right equipment. So don't just say, well, I checked my phone, I didn't see an email. It won't come through on your phone. The spam detection will pick it up and put it in your trash bin on your phone. I'll tell you that before you start. But this is grown folk stuff. You got to follow directions. And to close out my rant for the evening, when we have our collaborative meetings with superintendents and principals, you know what the number one thing that they want us to teach y'all to do is? Anybody want to venture a guess? Learn how to follow the directions. If they would just do that, we'd be so much better off in the school business. If you could just teach them how to follow directions. I told them if I could do that, I'd be a billionaire. But this is one of those times. Pay attention, follow directions. Use the right username and password. Get you a laptop. Don't try to do this stuff on your phone. Don't try to do it on a tablet or an iPad. I told you to start with first night. Nothing that we do is compatible with Apple at Gardner Webb. It won't work. Not Dale's opinion. It's just the way it works. But next week, I will take you through how to build your competency folio. By then, you should have an account. And what I'll tell you will make a whole lot more sense. And then I'll do Qualtrics with you, which is the survey program and analysis program that we use at Gardner Webb. All right, Dr. Stedman, back to you.
I will, and let me validate what Dr. Lamb said a while ago about my age. I'll let you figure it out. You see him and you see me. And my mama always told me to respect my elders, so I just respect him and let him get by with it. And I'll close with that. But normally on that fourth night, we also include some information about your internship, but we're going to change that. We're going to give it all to Dr. Lamb next week, and Dr. Hamilton and her team, Dr. Crawford, they will cover all the task internship requirements in there, and Dr. Revis and I will cover all of our internship requirements in our class sessions, and that way we can devote what we need to finish up with, give the time we need for Taskstream and for Qualtrics next week.
Yep.
Okay.
It should take us about 30 minutes minimum, and then we'll go from there, because we always have questions. And by then you should have established your account, and so that we can physically go in and do some of these things, and you won't just be kind of wondering what I'm talking about, that crazy man ranting. You'll be able to follow me and go in and do that. We'll do that next week.
Okay. Okay, guys, we'll see you on Tuesday, and we look forward to seeing excellent Task 2 assignments coming in by 6 o'clock Sunday evening. Okay?
All right.
Thank y'all.
Everybody have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.